Good evening, everyone. My name is Nyree. I head up the PR and communications at Beryl, and I'm going to be your moderator this evening. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm delighted you find the time to come and join us for day 2 of the Women at Beryl International Women's Day series. Tonight, we're coming in fast with a Choose to Challenge theme, and one that has notoriously been a contentious topic, the perceptions of female cyclists in the media. A huge thank you to Landor LINKS, our event partner, and a reminder that we have 3 more events this week. We'll drop a link in the chat so you can sign up to the others. Thanks to the Women at Beryl Network who put their heart and soul into making this event happen. And of course, we want to thank our fantastic panelists who are this evening going to help us unravel this controversial subject. Tonight, I'm joined this evening by an incredible lineup. First up, we've got Alex Davis from social media and expert, and the other half of Wheel Suckers podcast. Alex, here she is. Alex, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Hi, everybody. I'm Alex. Should I introduce myself again, or I'm just saying hello?
Please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex. I'm the captain co-host of the Wheel Suckers podcast that I host with Jenny, the director of the London Bike Kitchen. And I was previously, for the last 6 years, the community manager / social media marketing and events at Look Mum No Hands, a amazing cycling cafe workshop space on 49 Old Street, London. And now I'm a freelance social media person.
Thanks, Alex.
Hope that wasn't too long. Thanks.
Next up, we've got Dr. Lesley Ingram-Sills, lecturer in sports science, sports exercise and health at Edinburgh Napier University. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks to Beryl for putting on this amazing week of events and for asking me to join tonight. I'm a lecturer at Edinburgh Napier University in the Sports Science Department. I'm also an academic advisor within the Mountain Bike Centre for Scotland, which is an innovation centre looking at growing the Scottish cycling industry. I'm passionate about cycling for lots of different reasons, but within all of those roles, what I'm really keen to do is to make opportunities for all, so that regardless of your background, your gender, your race, you can get involved in cycling, whether that's participation or actually in the industry. I'm a former World Cup cross-country racer, so that's kind of why I like cycling, but a dodgy old knee stopped that, and these days I just cycle more for fun, for friendship, a bit of escapism, and of course for health, being a sports scientist.
Thanks, Lesley. Next up, we've got Jules Walker, cyclist, TV presenter and author.
Hi everyone, I'm Jules. Some people know me as Lady Velo. I am a freelance writer, author and presenter, and I've been in the cycling industry for 11 years now. So I started off with my blog Velo City Girl, which charted my love affair with cycling, the reasons why I wanted to get back on a bike at 28 years old, and also to try and hook up and identify with other people out there who look like me, who were on a bike and didn't see themselves being represented in that field. So I'm a cycling campaigner, a bit of a community builder in that sense as well, and basically just want to encourage more people out there to get on their bikes.
Thanks, Jules. And last but not least, we've got Laura Laker, journalist writing about transport and the environment.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Laura Laker. I kind of fell in love with cycling back in 2009-ish when a friend helped me to cycle to uni, and I was studying journalism shortly after that, and then found that cycling was all that I wanted to write about. I just loved it, loved how it made me feel, and loved the potential that it had to change other people's lives for the better, and cities, and just so many areas of our lives. So I've been doing that since about 2012 full time, and I also do a podcast called Streets Ahead, which is about infrastructure, and I'm all about kind of everyday cycling, with the odd random adventure thrown in and some travel writing. Sometimes I like to do silly things on bikes for fun.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. And as you can see, we've got a fantastic lineup of women. But before we start, I'd like to remind everyone that we've got the Q&As are open, so please get your questions in, and we'll aim to get to them all before the end. I want to start this evening with a stat, and that's 2/3 of Britons support equal media coverage for men and women's sport. But for many, it's on the condition that there is no decrease in the coverage of men's sports. That was a YouGov survey from last year. And in the next Olympic Games, female athlete numbers will finally be at parity with those of men. But then just yesterday, we read about Lizzie Banks and how she's calling for the disparity in the of prize money in women's road racing, and how she thinks that women are still too scared to make a stand. So as first point of discussion, I thought we'd start here, and I'd like to start with you, Lesley. As a former competitive athlete, how far have we come, and what are we calling for in 2021?
Thanks for that. I think what we're calling for is just a little bit more recognition within the women's field. So certainly in the pro peloton, we see that 57% of the women there are earning less than 15 grand a year, and over half of them aren't earning any money at all. So, you know, it's a really big disparity. When you start to look at race prize money, especially in the roads, the male counterparts are being paid 7 times more than the female counterparts. So, it's a really big gap. It's something that needs to be addressed, and I think there's lots of different ways of addressing that. And I think, you know, we are starting to see that movement. We're starting to see more coverage of the female sports, but a lot of the money, they're saying, instead of going into prizes or funding the females, is actually going into trying to give them more coverage. And you sort of get into that chicken and egg scenario with that. But also with that, we also have some disciplines that are, you know, leading the way, that are being trailblazers. So we've got, in the mountain bike world, the Enduro World Series, and they have equal prize money for their male and female counterparts. They also take the top 15 female riders and the top 30 male riders, and they put them on the tracks really close together, so that when the photographers are there, they get more coverage. Obviously, being mountain biking, that's quite important because they're spread all over a mountain, you know, and it can be quite difficult in order to get that. But I think what we really want to see is more people, more race organisers acknowledging this, you know, understanding that actually, if we want to increase participation in female sport down in the early years, we need to make it attractive to them to want to be able to, you know, compete. They're still competing in similar races. It's, you know, they're having to put in all the hard training and all the hard graft. So we need to make sure that we're balancing that out in some shape or form.
And speaking of that more recognition, I know that about 5 years ago, Jules, Laura and Alex, you were previously on a similar panel debate in real life. And I just wondered, I just wondered how, you know, how you've seen this similar debate change over the last 5 years. I'll send it out to you first, Alex.
So we organised this event, did we say it was how many years ago now? 5 years ago?
Yeah.
5 years ago at Look Mum No Hands, organised with the Women and Gender Variant group that the London Bike Kitchen organise. And it was a discussion on, I can't remember the full title now, but it was just literally the kind of this theme of just discussing how women are portrayed in the media. And it's tough, like over the 5 years, you kind of think, what has changed? There's still sexist posts. There's still brands using really highly sexist imagery. I even spotted one the other day, like yesterday. And, you know, I guess similar to what Leslie's saying, we need to just have more women represented generally from the beginning to the end of sport. But in media, it needs to be coming from women and featuring women. So I think the things that I'm losing my train of thought now, but
no,
what do you think, Jules?
I was going to chime in and say that the fact that we're still having these conversations tell you that there's still a lot of work to be done. You know, we did that panel conversation, as we were saying, 5 years ago, and it's still reflected in the media now, that there may not actually be that many women in place within media organisations working behind the scenes, because some of the stuff that we've seen quite recently on social media, some of the sexist and quite misogynistic posts that have been coming from some cycling brands out there as well, kind of tells you that there weren't a lot of women present when it was being pitched, or the fact that this even made it past the door as a good idea. So, behind the scenes, what's going on with the media companies and corporations that are working within cycling, I don't know. It's just, I just imagine it to be a room that's not particularly diverse and not particularly representative, and then it just keeps on getting churned out. Because as far as they're concerned, maybe if they're patting themselves on the back and it's getting great coverage and people are clicking on it because it's just clickbait and it's going to lead to the kind of discussions that we're going to be having this evening, as far as they're concerned, they're doing a good job. So there's nothing there rattling and shaking them to think we have to change our ways.
Yeah, I want to chip in with that. Is anybody aware of what Burger King posted yesterday, which I know is a bit of a curveball, but
I screen grabbed it when I saw it just in case it got deleted. I haven't gone back to check to see, but I don't even want to say.
Actually, they've deleted it. Hey, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Alex, would you like to elaborate, Alex?
Yeah, for those who didn't know, Burger King did a thread tweet, which if some of you are social media people, that's a very nice thing to do. If you've got a lot of different information in a tweet, you don't want to put it all in the first tweet and then you go down. So the problem was their first tweet was women should be in the kitchen. And then the second tweet was, if they want to, we've set up a new scheme where we support females to become chefs in our kitchens. And it's like, we know what you've done there. You've done a misogynistic, sexist joke to lead everybody in with your first tweet, and then you've used the second one to highlight a great scheme that you've done that's supporting women. And you can just imagine the trustees and the board members are going to look at the numbers, like the amount of retweets, the amount of likes, and the amount of comments that this post got. They'll be patting themselves on the back that they did a good job. But I'm really glad it's gone down now, because people were complaining. So it's nice that they've actually taken that on board. But I did also see they paid for a full page in, I think, like the New York Times of the exact same advert.
Oh, okay.
You think, how much money was that when you could have put all that money into actually just doing the scheme and advertising the scheme and doing a really nice photo of somebody cooking? So I think social media is tricky, because if you value clicks and likes, you should actually be valuing more the message behind it, and if you're doing the right thing.
And I think that brings me neatly on to my next point that I'd like to make about women and women's places, and the representation of that is often defined by how men see women, and how that strategy of shrink it and pink it still seems to be heavily relied on by marketeers, and not just in across all areas, not just in sport. And I didn't know whether I'd like to bring Laura in on that, and Lesley as well.
Well, I mean, maybe sort of, I guess this kind of problem of disparity in like gender balance is also a problem in kind of everyday cycling as well. And it's maybe not so much about the kind of kit, but as the kind of physical infrastructure. One great thing that we've seen, maybe one sort of light point in the pandemic, has been these sort of pop-up cycle lanes that have been happening in cities around the world, and that has increased the proportion of women cycling, which is fantastic, because one of the things that we know is that women need safe routes to cycle and are less tolerant of dodgy, busy roads and things. I think there was in the past a kind of, and kit's not my kind of expertise, my area of expertise so much, but I think there was in the past this kind of idea that women needed like women-specific bikes because women have different proportions, when actually women have a variety of proportions, and that kind of idea of women having sort of shorter torsos and longer legs doesn't apply to me, and it doesn't apply to a lot of women. So I think it's about having smaller sizes sometimes, like having smaller cycles, and you get smaller men as well. So good to have a wider range, and I think cycles tend to be sort of a narrow range because it makes it kind of cheaper to produce.
And I think, Lesley, in your area of research, I think you've come across you know, in terms of like how women perform, you know, there is differences, but they're not that much. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think I'd probably start it off by saying, like, if we think about the industry, women are not just small men, and I think a lot of the time people in the industry think that, and then they base everything around that, and that's where some of the disparity happens. So, you know, I absolutely agree with what Laura's saying there. Like, we might not need a specialist frame, but actually what we need is the information, and we need to be able to access that information and to feel safe going into bike shops and finding out this information, you know. And because of, you know, we're all different sizes, we're all different shapes, you know, we do see that even in things like the clothing market. So, you know, females who are bustier can really struggle to get cycling apparel that they feel comfortable in, because most of the time it's really tight, you know. And if we want to increase participation, and when I talk about participation, you know, yeah, it's amazing getting Olympic athletes out at the end of this, but actually what we want is a healthier society. So we want, you know, young girls on bikes. We want, you know, we just want more people cycling, don't we? That's going to save the NHS big bucks if we're all healthier for longer. And while if we can take some traffic off roads and we can make really safe spaces to do that, why are we not doing that? But, you know, I really think moving forward, you know, I'm an eternal optimist, and I think we've been through a hell of a year, right? It's been crazy. But, you know, the real positives coming out of that are when we see things like infrastructure changing because of the pandemic. And that's something that I think we can really drive forward with. In terms of the, you know, female physiology, God, that I could go on all night about that. It's probably a whole different topic. But the take-home message for that is women are so under-researched. It's unbelievable. And, you know, in the sports science world, we're starting to wake up and really start to focus on that. And it's definitely going to be an area, I think, you know, that we'll start to see a lot more detailed research coming out. But it really needs it. We need to understand the difference in female physiology over the course of a menstrual cycle, and how that impacts on everything from everyday cycling to, you know, when you're thinking about your elite performers up at the top end. So lots of work to be done. I'm going to be busy for my career, which is good.
And Alex, can we just move back onto you on this subject, you know, about how are we still being misrepresented, and you know, in terms of from your experience through the podcast and your work?
So we actually started the podcast because it was my nightlight's being noisy. We started the podcast in 2017, 4 years ago, and that was because at the time there were hardly any podcasts that weren't about pro male cycling. Just all of them were always just, you know, they joke, they say that like what do you call a group of four guys, a podcast. And that was what a lot of the cycling stuff was at the time. And me and Jenny really wanted to highlight the unrepresented voices in cycling. We really wanted to speak to people that weren't pros. We really wanted to speak to people that just either cycled every day or just did something a little bit more interesting, or was somebody that never had a chance to, you know, be interviewed before. And I think that's always a clear message, especially around the time of International Women's Day, of like, if you have a platform to lift other people up and to support people. So that the podcast was a chance for us to do that. And we've interviewed some amazing people. We've interviewed like porn stars, porn directors, you know, ex downhill champions, you know, new racers, old racers. And listening to those stories has been really amazing. And it's been really fun to see some of them go on to other shows. And it's been so fun to see other shows crop up. I think maybe not because of it, I don't know. But the podcast now, there's so much more selection, there's so much more choice. And I think, you know, it's because there's a demand for it. And I think just talking about podcasts specifically, I think the DIY aspect, that you can actually just go out and do one. I think the technology now makes it so much easier for people to do it. If you see a gap somewhere in a scene that you are in, it doesn't even matter if it's cycling, do it. Make it, especially if you're passionate about it. If you've realized there isn't a club for you, make that club. and find other people that connect with you. And I think that's the most exciting thing about, like, with Wheel Suckers, us doing that and connecting with all these cyclists. And it happened a lot with Look Mum No Hands. We just created a space for people to come and connect. And that's a way I can lead on to talk about the Women of Colour Cycling Collective, because that Look Mum No Hands, we were a space where like Jules and Jenny would come and meet up, and we just did a shout out and be like, anybody else that wants to come, you know, that is a woman of colour that just wants to meet other women of colour, and no agenda, just come and chat. And like, I think that's really important for people to just
Definitely.
allow you to connect with other like-minded people and just share your personal stories. And what's super fun is that's now the Women of Colour Cycling Collective has now become a charity. They posted yesterday, and it's very interesting that previously, before this panel, we talked about I'd highlighted that Twitch, if no one's aware, Twitch is kind of a live streaming platform, did a post about women, but they spell women without the E, with an X. And they got a lot of backlash from the trans LGBTQI community that they do not like that word. And I spoke to Jenny today, and they are actually going to change the wording of the charity now in reflection of that. So I think that's just an interesting thing to touch on, that sometimes you can be using words and phrases that you think are the best, but sometimes you have to change them to accommodate the people that they not affect, but the people you're trying to represent. So it's kind of an interesting thing where I was like, yesterday I was like, oh, Jenny, are you aware of this? But they are actually going to change it and move forward. So I think we're always never not learning. I think you should always listen to the people around you, and always just be prepared to be like, okay, we're going to change that, or I'm not going to do that this time. So I think that's a kind of interesting thing.
It's a really positive point. And Jules, you know, you've written about it in your book about finding a space for you and people who look like you on a bike. And I wondered if you wanted to come in with any more on being on women being misrepresented and Black women cycling in particular.
No, it's just I want to touch on from what Alex was saying as well, just having somewhere like Look Mum No Hands as, like, you know, the genesis of what the Women of Colour Cycling Collective has grown on to be, the importance of having a safe space like that, having somewhere offered to you that you can come to, and you know that you're not going to be judged, and you're amongst people who are like you and are feeling the same way as well. Like, never underestimate the power that has, and the power that will give to other people within that circle as well. So, you know, when I talked about wanting to basically find my people in cycling in my book, it was important, because it sounds crazy, but when you do look for your people or try to find someone that you identify with, and then something like the Women of Colour Cycling Collective happens, you will then sometimes get shit for doing it as well. So you've found, you know, something like cycling that you want to be part of, and you don't necessarily feel like that you fit into that space. So, you know, you go away and you create a space, exactly what Alex was saying. You create this space, you have this safe space, you have people then coming into it, and then you get the same people who are telling you once upon a time you don't belong here, what you're doing is really exclusionary, you shouldn't be doing this, so you're bad. And in the early days of the Women of Colour Cycling Collective, that was something that did pop up on the Facebook page for it as well. And even when I posted stuff about it on my own Facebook page for Velo City Girl stuff, I would get people telling me that I was racist for helping found something like that. And it's just like, okay, there's a lot of nuance that's missing from the conversation we need to have around that. But it's almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So, you know, there is a real need for these spaces and for these groups to exist, and you mustn't let anyone who's coming at you with nonsense and noise like that discourage you from doing this. You know, it's essential that, you know, in order to thrive, you have somewhere like that, or a collective like that you can be comfortable in. But it's a never-ending conversation that goes on about the need of why that's got to be there, and then why people are essentially pissed off that you've decided to do something like that.
It can be really draining to constantly have to explain why you're doing something. And I think I want to add, like sometimes you have to also try and listen who's complaining about something and why. Like you said, Jules, you know, you got people moaning about that group. Sometimes you just have to really listen. Like, what's interesting is you'll get complaints about stuff, and you have to just sometimes really sit with other people and be like, right, which ones are the ones who actually care? And they're just saying this because they want to. And that's such a shame that happened with that group, because you're like, it doesn't affect you.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect you.
Somehow it's offended you. So, you know, it just feels like you have to apologize for existing. And that in itself is exhausting.
Yeah. It's always
exhausting. I think we can all agree that we don't want to focus solely on the negative, despite the tendency that we could really just do that all night, I know. But I'd like to sort of talk about we want to give our audience something tonight, I think, so go away with feeling that there is support out there and allyship across, you know, with men and across the board. And so something that I read recently was, and I'm going to bring Laura in on this, was that nearly 1/3 of female journalists consider leaving the profession because of online attacks and threats. So I just wondered, Laura, do you have any examples of supportive male colleagues? And then we can go on to discuss broader, you know, the allyship and that sort of you know, somebody who's supporting the visibility of you and your voice in your job.
Yeah, I think I don't know. There's because I write about cycling as a way of getting around. There's been a lot of kind of aggro on social media around that, low traffic neighbourhoods and pop-up cycle lanes, a lot of anger, and I've been on the receiving end of some of that. But I don't think that's because of my gender. I noticed that male journalists have also had the same, so it's quite hard sometimes to kind of. Yeah, I think one good thing that's been happening in the media recently is like women focused editions of what would have been traditionally like male magazines. Like Ruler did this amazing women's edition, and it was like the biggest selling in their history. Cycling Weekly did one. I think Ruler going forward are going to have 50-50 men women split in their content, which is amazing. There's obviously huge demand for it, and that's the thing. And it's the same when men and women's racing is put on equal footing. Women's racing sometimes gets more viewers. It's just about putting that out there. But I think there are some really good kind of allies, and there have been in my journey through cycling. From like my first cycling trips, I met friends along the way who would go with me and like be really supportive and like not patronizing, but like help me out, give me advice when I needed it. And just generally be like fun to be with. I've had editors who've been super supportive of my work, and I think because I've always been into this kind of idea of everyday cycling, it's kind of became a sort of niche quite early on, and so that was my thing, and I was never sort of felt held back by being female. And yeah, just been really lucky. There's some great people in the cycling world and in cycle journalism. And yeah, I mean, it's badly paid. That's one reason I thought about leaving for a while, but that's not. But I mean, maybe that's a gender pay gap, but I think it's just journalism. It's really badly paid. But I think
talk for the love, Laura.
Do it for the money. Do it for the love. Yeah. But yeah, I think people can be, you know, if you're into the world of cycling, it's just to be encouraging of others, really. Alex and I actually met at a women-only track day at the Lee Valley Velodrome. And the first time I went, it was like I didn't get off. There's like a flat bit, and then there's the track, and then on the corners it's incredibly steep, and I didn't get off the flat bit. I'm quite a chicken when there's new things, and I was just like riding along. The guy was like, "Go up on the bank," and I was like, "No!" And yeah, there were just all these guys like hurtling along, and I was like, no way in hell I'm getting up there. And it looked like a wall. And then there was the women's session, and it just made such a difference. It was me and Alex. I remember Alex was behind me. I was like, oh, who are you? She's like, I'm doing social media. And then yeah, I just thought of it today, actually, just remembered it. And it was like so much easier, just with an all women group. There was like none of the pressure. It was just really, and Jules and Alex were talking about, you know, spaces where you feel comfortable. You don't, yeah. That was like a space for me to get into cycling. So yeah, there's like lots of good kind of experiences out there that have helped me on my journey. And yeah, and so yeah, definitely not all bad.
And Lesley, how about you? Obviously, as a former professional sports person, I wonder how you felt as a woman in cycling, and how you've had had male colleagues or peers or coaches even that have helped you on your journey?
Yeah, I mean, through my whole career in academia, in racing, I've had a lot of progressive male allies at my side that is really reassuring. And I think part of this is sort of saying, to those guys in those meetings, like, stand up and have a voice. I've also worked in academia with lots of unprogressive males, and you go into boardroom meetings and whatever, and you're just like, where are all the other females? Especially being in sort of STEM activities, you really start to notice the difference or the disparity of how many women are actually in those. But I think you surround yourself with people that you like in life, don't you? So I surround myself with males that I enjoy their company, and and they've been certainly supportive and progressive in helping me get along. And the other ones I don't, but that's not just for males, that's for anyone, that's for women, for whatever, but I think it is really important that you do have those spaces and that you can progress. I think certainly when I was racing, there became a point where I actually couldn't ride with a lot of female friends because they just weren't pushing me enough. I almost needed the male counterpart. But actually then when I got onto like really technical, difficult stuff, they were gone in a flash. So then I was just riding through the forest by myself thinking, I'm not really learning anything here, am I? And and then as more women get into the sport, you start to get all different levels. And I think that's what's key, isn't it? I keep kind of going back to participation. I feel like it's all I've been talking about all night, but that's what we need. We need more people doing all different disciplines of cycling, whether that's cycling to work or I've even tried my hand at BMX. I was awful. But we obviously enjoy it. We want to open that up and make it more enjoyable for people. And I think that there are lots of barriers in cycling, like it can be quite expensive. It isn't open for all. It's not a level playing field. So I'm really keen for us to start smashing down some of those barriers and helping people to get into it, regardless of where they come from, regardless, of their gender, regardless of their race. If they want to do it, let's work together and find ways, that we can really push that forward. And in terms of, positive role models within that as well, Cycling Industries Europe have also just launched Women in Cycling, and they've created a whole platform of where they're going to, basically expose all women that are working in industry and really try to elevate that, across industry and really call it out. And I think that's really important and for moving forward.
It's definitely a great platform, and I urge any women out there or on the panel, if you're not already there, to sign yourselves up, because you can put yourself on that website and people can pick you for panels like this. And I'm going to move on to you, Jules. Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of, obviously you loved to cycle as a child and you left it for a while and then came back to it, and how did you find that coming back to it, and obviously you've loved it because you still do it, and it's your job.
Yeah.
But it was great to know what helped you on your way.
I think it was the community of just folks out there, full stop, that I found through the power of social media. I say it a lot, but I refer to everybody that has welcomed me in and made me feel part of that as my cycling family, because it just feels like I've created some amazing bonds with people over the 11 years that I've been doing this for. And it's just, the sheer strength in numbers of other women out there who are into cycling, want to get into cycling. It could be from grassroots all the way up to elite level. It's just the impact of being able to meet other like-minded women and other like-minded folks like that is important. And for the fact of wanting to try out something new in cycling, that's kind of cool as well, because the running joke with me is that I got my Pashley Princess. That was my first bike, the only bike that I wanted, wasn't interested in anything else. This is cool. And then many bikes and many different disciplines later, I can dabble in these things and enjoy the fact that I dabble in them. I don't feel bad about the fact that I'm not on my road bike all the time. I don't feel bad about the fact that I'm not commuting every single day. Like, I've got nowhere to commute to now at the moment, but that's not the point. But you know, it's like, it doesn't feel like I'm not a proper cyclist if I'm not doing the thing in a particular way all the time. And just in regards to what Lesley was saying as well, like the different disciplines that are out there, it should be open and welcoming for anyone out there to feel like if they want to give this a try, they should. But there are barriers that stand in between that happening. So, you know, there's the money element, there's a socio-economic element of getting into something that should just be, as far as I'm concerned, completely normalized and an everyday activity that anyone, no matter what your ability is, should be able to do. So for me, cycling as a kid, I got my sister's hand-me-down BMX burner, which I absolutely loved. My parents couldn't have afforded to get me the bike that I wanted, because there was always a risk that they'd do that and exactly what happened to my sister would then happen to me, that this bike that you've paid some money for is just going to sit down and rust and nothing's going to happen with it. So, you know, I wasn't able to afford to get my bike until I was 28 years old. And even that was through something like a cycle to work scheme. So if you're in a position that you're working somewhere that has something like that available, that's great. I had to dig around to find out that that was actually something available at my workplace. But I also understand that it was kind of a luxury to be working somewhere that had that scheme available. Not everywhere has that. Not everybody has access to that. And that's the other thing that's important to keep in mind as well, is accessibility for people to be able to get into riding bikes. So look at it from all levels. Look at it where you've got, you know, bike kitchens that are out there helping people build their own bikes. The fact that that could be more affordable and more entry level, and the knowledge that you would get from that as well, like learning how to build your own bike, is amazing. So it's the tools that you get to take away from that, as well as the joy of being able to be on a bike, is brilliant. So there are plenty of levels with that need to be looked at and examined, and more of that stuff needs to be talked about as well. Like, especially just going back to what we're talking about in the sense of representation in the media. When I first got into cycling, I wasn't hearing about things like bike kitchens and places that you can go to learn those skills and learn how to build your own bike and what have you. It was, you know, this is the latest bike, this is what you should be buying, this is the kit, this is what you're going to need to do it. Like, there was no alternative. Like, that was the only way to get into it. That in itself is a massive barrier if that's what you're presented with. It's like, well, I can't afford it, I don't understand what all of this stuff is, this isn't for me, I'm out. And that's a shame. So yeah, just thinking outside of the cycling box and the demographic that's always targeted when it comes to getting into riding bikes, just kind of need to smash that a bit.
I think that's it. It's so important as well that the fact is that the representation there is of women in cycling is of quite often professionals, which, you know, that is fantastic. But I think we've discussed this previously. If you have ever got on a bike, you're a cyclist, no matter, you know, even if you haven't got on one for 5 years, you know, you can still do it. If you've never got on one, but you really want to give it a go, you should. I think, you know, this is what we are, you know, it's about making this something very normal and very accessible for everyone. I think we're sort of coming to the end of this.
Can I just quickly jump in just to say, I only want to add a quick ally thing, which leads into what you just said, Jules, which was like the owners of Look Mum No Hands are 3 guys, some like maybe mid-40s. I get that's not an issue, but what I liked about them was they just left me to my own devices. They never checked anything that I did, really, ever. All the events and everything that we did at Look Mum No Hands, the films, the panels, the workshops, the meetups, no one ever said anything about what I was going to do. They just let me do it. But they did have one quibble when we did the Wheel Suckers podcast. They were like, but you're going to collaborate with London Bike Kitchen, aren't they our competitor? And I was like, they're actually not, because Look Mum No Hands is a bike workshop. We fix the bikes. LBK teaches you to fix the bike. And some people sometimes want to learn how to fix their bikes, and other times you actually just want to hand it to a mechanic and just have it done. And they were like, oh yeah, okay, actually. Like, you can work with other brands and other businesses and it not be detrimental, and if anything, actually benefit each other. So, and I think that's a really interesting thing that you could always take on and think, maybe I could work with this other brand or business in a way that's going to be beneficial.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think we're going to move on to some audience questions now. We have quite a few in, so I'll just whip through them. And here we go, first one. I'm planning a campaign to encourage more women to cycle for their everyday local journeys. Does the panel have advice? Any nuggets of wisdom to share? What was the one thing that got you back in the saddle when you were starting your cycling journey as an adult? Who would like to? Laura.
I'm like one of those little cats with the wave its hand. Yeah, so for me, getting back into cycling as an adult, which I alluded to earlier, it was actually a friend from uni who lived sort of nearish to me, and we were on the same course. We're still friends today. It's like more than 10 years ago. But yeah, she basically rode with me one day into uni, and then that was it. It was like having the route and knowing the route. And that's like a really powerful thing for getting people into cycling. And my boyfriend wasn't cycling in London until he met me. And we've sort of cycled around town, and I've showed him the quiet routes, and that's been really helpful for him. And he's kind of off on his own now as well, which is really cool. And also, I would say that's a really good tool. It's quite labor intensive, but it's really powerful in just like making people feel empowered to like, oh, I can ride this route. If you're looking to like help them get to work, you can ride the route with them on a quiet day, and yeah, get to know the route. Breeze, British Cycling's Breeze has like a really good kind of women's network, and it's local ride leaders who will like take women out and give them confidence, and so that's quite a good model. You could become like a Breeze ride leader. But yeah, I think having that sort of community, having like maybe a group of women that go out together when it's permitted, having like a community of supportive people is really powerful as well. So there's a good place to start.
I would recommend I think Sustrans do routes as well, and even City Mapper. I think City Mapper's got great cycling. It's got like fast, medium, quiet. I think if you're going to be encouraging people to cycle if they haven't for a while, having something to track your route or work your route out if you get lost. And having like meetups so people could come and meet other people, or having like sessions where you just practice, like a cycle instructor, because if you haven't cycled for a while, and actually we did it at Look Mum No Hands, we got paid, so we paid somebody to come and give all of us training, and we were, and you're like, wow, we were all so awful, like we weren't checking behind our shoulders. Some of us we were all doing completely different things that, this instructor was like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Why are you doing that? And you don't realize when you've been cycling for years and years, when you've just been doing your own thing, when someone's like, why are you doing that? So I don't know if there's a way to offer that, like one-on-one would be really nice for some people, in a group would be really nice for some people, maybe even just offering up some sort of like chat to somebody about my options, because it's just too many things that are stopping people. The barriers are huge.
Laura,
a lot of London boroughs do free cycle training, so you'll get like a session or two, so that will probably restart when things like that are permitted. But yeah, even if you're experienced, it's like you can still learn things. So yeah, no shame in that. They're brilliant for confidence building too.
There are more spaces as well that are being created that are completely removing the road element. So you can go to tracks and there's no cars at all. So it is daunting if you've not been on a bike for ages, and you try and look around your shoulder and you find actually you are in the middle of the road. If there's a car there, that's an issue. So there's lots of different things that you can tap into. But I think, look at your cycling bodies. So British Cycling, Scottish Cycling, Sustrans, there's lots of them out there, and they should be able to, if you get in touch with the wrong person, hopefully they'll forward you on to the right person to be able to create that. And actually there's a lot of women's spaces and groups evolving within those as well.
Yeah, I actually totally forgot the government's funded bikeability for every adult who wants it in the country as part of the emergency COVID stuff. So bikeability would be a good place to go as well.
And if you're in Scotland, just map out where the hills are.
It'll be beautiful when you get to the top, though.
Yeah, it's great when you get to the top, but
okay, that's fantastic. Thanks, everyone. We'll move on to the next question. How can those of us working in the industry, even as women, help make lasting change. Sometimes it feels like an uphill battle, and as Jules said, 5 years on, we're still having these same conversations.
I feel a bit like with this with Look Mum, like I was there for like 6 years. I think change, you need to change what change means to you, I think, and just have some values that you are like, I know I'm going to improve the number of women at events. I'm going to improve the number of events that reach a different kind of community. Like, change is so hard, you know, with all the barriers of the whole world. I think in your job, just look at the stats of the job where you are currently, and then start to just push for the numbers to go up in the things that you value. And my advice would be to connect with everybody else in the industry and just try and be friends with them or talk to them as a human being, and not try to like undercut them or shit on them. Like, it's not going to get you anywhere. And connect with other people maybe on the same level, because you can both chat about the same things. You know, oh, I'm marketing this and it's not quite working. Oh, I've been trying to do that and it's not working. Like, I would push to just try and connect and be better and improve what you're doing. I just think personally change is too hard a thing to take on and do.
Yeah, it's not, change isn't something that is static. Like, change, obviously within the word you understand that changes happen. It's the whole thing of people within the cycling industry, like what you were saying, Alex, they're not your competitors, they're not your enemy. You want to collaborate and work with these people. You know, one particular cycling brand or group or organization may have more reach than you have. So, you know, if you're talking to them, they can pull those resources and share them with you. And, you know, it's again, changing what you want your change focuses to be. For me, one of the biggest changes that I knew I needed to do was actually step away from a job that I had in the cycling industry to be able to work in the different areas that I wanted to focus on so badly, because I wasn't able to do that where I was. That's not to discredit where I was before, but it just wasn't working. And it's knowing that if you're feeling like you're sort of banging your head against a brick wall within the industry itself, if you can take yourself out of that situation and maybe be able to go into other places and other spaces and work with people to develop what change is, then that's an important thing to do. So don't feel like, you know, if you're feeling slightly stifled in whatever role it is that you have in the industry or what you're doing, there's nothing that you can do, like there's no way to make change. There is. It's even just changing your thinking, changing the people that you're speaking to, changing the people that you should be collaborating and talking to as well. So unity can lead to change.
I'd agree with that as well. And I think be visible and mentor, you know, look out for other women who want to come through those ranks. If you know, change, it's so difficult to measure, but actually, you know, you've got an academic in the room and I'll say, you know, you can measure change, but you need to think about what it is and that you're trying to measure within that word change, you know. But happy to have conversations with anyone after today, you know, if they want to delve into that a little bit more in depth.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. We often hear that only men want to use bikes for everyday transport. The majority of my customers, and it's bike subscriptions in brackets, identify as female, but I am the only full-time employee and I am a man. What would you say is the most important thing I can do to keep supporting these people?
So in terms of, I just had a thought about sort of getting women into the cycling industry, and I remember writing an article about why there aren't more female mechanics, and one of the things that was suggested was that because boys are sort of, there's like a trajectory of like learning to fix things when you're little and then like going and being like a Saturday person in the bike shop, and it was about kind of changing the job descriptions to be about personal attributes rather than like a skill set, and then training people in the job so you know that they're the kind of person you want to employ, and then like making that change from there. So yeah, just wanted to add that. In terms of only men wanting to cycle every day, in the Netherlands, where they've obviously got a lovely cycle network, more women than men make cycle trips, and that's because cycling is actually like really well suited to the kind of journeys that women tend to make. Women tend to do more childcare and more caring for other family members than men, and tend to be part-time workers as their childcare kind of evolves over time. And so they're taking more short journeys and trip chaining, which is doing one trip after another and then coming back home. And so, yeah, cycling is like super well suited to those kind of journeys. It's just about having the safe network of routes, of like safe, quiet streets and main road cycle lanes, which we don't really have in this country. And that's really the main reason that women don't cycle. And the COVID emergency pop-up stuff has kind of shown that. But yeah, in terms of supporting, so it was about supporting women to
yeah, I guess we don't know how you want to support them. It's so tricky because I think it's interesting. It's like you understand, you know, you say only men want to cycle, but that's not true of your subscribers. Your subscribers are female. So how do you support your subscribers? I guess by trying to talk to them, and maybe by offering options or surveys, or, you know, Survey Monkey's pretty cool. You could really map out loads of different things. You could like ask lots of different questions. I think always take it with a pinch of salt, or at least like outline the kind of things you kind of like, and then give it to the subscribers. It's hard to work out how you want to subscribe it, but I think maybe just take a step back and be like, it doesn't matter that you're a male, and it doesn't matter that they're female, because they want to cycle and they like cycling and they're subscribing, so they're into it. I think maybe just be prepared to, if you make a mistake, be honest about it and don't make excuses, and don't kind of, oh, it was this and oh, it was that. Just be like, okay, that didn't work, let's move on. How could we do this better? And always maybe give them a really clear, easy option to communicate with you about anything. And maybe even making that anonymous. So if they do really have concerns about anything that happens that doesn't work, that's a great way to kind of continue to move forward.
Thanks, Alex. Another question here. How do we make pathways to cycling more accessible to women, and what role does the media play in that? Would anyone like to answer that?
Pathways. I was like, sorry, I keep picking apart all the words. I'm like, it's such a shame when it's not like in an audience where you can just hand them the mic.
I know, I can't go and ask the question again. I'm sorry.
I guess what role does the media play?
Yeah, I was just going to say on that some of the imagery that the media puts out there is off-putting in itself, or, you know, it sets a standard that either some people feel like that they can't reach, or they're, you know, it's just completely over there, out of the way, can't get to it. So yeah, I mean, the media has its good side, the media has its bad side in regards to what's being put out there. The cycling media hopefully are starting to wake up to this, like every now and then, as we've discussed before this chat as well, that you will find the odd hiccup of where it feels like that they've completely missed the memo and haven't read the room. And that's an important thing to do as well, to read the room and understand that if you're still peddling out this same narrative, and that's never going to change, that's never going to feel like it's welcoming women into that field as well. So yeah, the media carry a lot of the responsibility of that, and they need to do better. They just essentially need to do better. And again, it could turn into the conversation of making sure that women and those who identify as women are actually within that industry in the first place and are being listened to and have, I know I say this phrase over and over again, but a seat at the table when these decisions are being made. So yeah, it's just internal changes, lots of internal changes that still need to go on.
Or at least doing those like review things, you know, when you get like a group of people together, I can't remember the word, when you do like a kind of round table.
Focus group.
A focus group, that's the one. Focus groups are pretty good, but then it's getting the right people for the focus group. But I think, yeah,
and that's the whole point. That's the diversity, isn't it? And the representation. You want those people in there too, because
I tell you what, if you do a focus group, give them something for their time, and it should generally be money. But otherwise, if you're a brand, give them products, you know, and give them quite a lot of products. So that's quite a good way to do it. Don't try and ask for people's time for free. Like in media, like, you know, and if you're doing photography, like try and pay your models, or pay your models with something else in kind, or, you know, things like that.
We've just got a few more minutes left, so I'm going to try and rattle through a few more comments and questions. Bear with me. Okay. It sounds like social media and relationships have actually played a greater role in each of your journeys in cycling, even whether that's into cycling media. How can traditional media catch up to reaching more people at this level?
Well, traditional media can branch out. It's like I completely separate from cycling, but I co-host a podcast, Adventures in Coffee, and I've loved the idea of doing a podcast. Obviously, Alex and Jenny have Wheelsuckers podcast going on as well. It's these different mediums that are available to reach to different people. Not everybody necessarily is into reading, you know, magazines or, you know, long form reads online and stuff like that. There are different ways to connect to people. Like, I feel old because I still haven't got into using TikTok and stuff like that, but there are people that consume information in different ways. Do you know what I mean? So if you're looking for snackable content, something like Instagram lives or something like reels and stuff like that, you know, maybe more traditional stuffy media will just be like, no, that's not us. This is our magazine. It's been going for X amount of years. This is what we're going to do something different. If you want to reach out to different people and different audiences, think about the way how people are consuming that information as well. So for me, doing the Ventures in Coffee podcast is brilliant, because I know that there are people listening to it who just want the audio. That's it. They just want something that's either going on in the background with them, or something they feel like that they can engage with as well. So you feel like you're part of that conversation. So yeah, I think it's just looking outside of whatever slightly fusty traditional ways that you had before to connect with different people. Try something new. If it doesn't work out for you, you'll find out by doing it. It's the only way that you're gonna work out if it connects with people or not. So yeah, just shake it up a bit.
Yeah, I think I find the problem with traditional media, like, I guess if we're talking about print, there's so many elements that go into that now, that, you know, things like getting a Twitter account and tweeting from, there's less barriers. And like letterpress printing, you know, that's a lot of work, like with the lead letters and getting it all right. Like, I think print, in a way, I don't want to say it's dead, but it takes a lot more people to work on and produce, when like modern like forms of digital media are way quicker and faster to get out and to reach people, especially now with COVID. Like, we're all online, we're all connecting in different ways through screens. So it's really hard, I think, for traditional media to catch up, when traditional media can't even be as quick as digital media. You know, it can't even kind of snap and connect with all the things that are happening. But that's why things like podcasts and audio and like live streaming and YouTube and TikTok, like there's so many other interesting avenues now to create content that you shouldn't have to be kind of constrained by anything.
Definitely. Oh, go on, Laura. As the journalist in the room.
One in defence of traditional media, because I sometimes write for these outlets, I did a little search as like some unscientific experiments before today, just looking at how like commuter cycling was represented. And to be fair to them, I think places like the Evening Standard and the Independent, or I, have said that have had like commuter cycling articles, but by women and about women's stuff, but not. It wasn't like branded as like a women's cycling article. It was like, how do you get into commuting by bike? And this is all in the last few months. And and so that was really good to see, I thought, because I guess traditionally, or a few years back, it would have been like commuter cycling. There were like men in like technical gear, and not women looking like they're wearing regular gear, which is something that Jules does really well, like just looking good on a bike. And it's like makes it appealing to more people. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have to be like, I don't have to wear something clingy, and like maybe, I can look nice while I'm riding.
And on that note, before we wrap up, I've got one last question for you. What's your favourite piece of cycling kit that you couldn't live without, apart from your bike, of course?
Oh gosh.
Beret. Berets are good in the rain.
Mm.
Got curly hair, so it gets quite fluffy when it's raining. A beret can take an amazing amount of rain before your head gets wet. You wouldn't believe it.
Oh, shout out to Luffy gloves. I've got some Luffy gloves. If you don't know what they are, they're the smiley face gloves, but they have a smiley face on the hand. So that when you're cycling, you can show your hand to a car and it's like you're smiling at them. They're super, super fun. Jack, the founder, is such a nice guy. They're like, if you just want to make it, like, makes me laugh wearing them. So
That's really.
We've hit 7 o'clock, but if anybody wants to add in their favourite piece of kit before I wrap up, please do.
Anything that allows me to attach bags to my bike. So just storage. I'm all about storage. If I can get panniers, basket, whatever. So it's storage for me. And cycling caps as well. I really like cycling caps.
And for me as the token Scot, it's anything that keeps me dry.
Fantastic. Well, just to wrap up, I just want to say thanks everyone for joining us tonight again, and thanks to the fantastic panelists, the team at Landor and the Women at Beryl network as well. We hope you've enjoyed everything. We certainly have had a bit of a laugh tonight, so it was great. Thanks again, everybody, and hopefully we'll do this again soon.